What is the biggest sign that somebody has too much stuff?
The biggest sign is that they feel overwhelmed. I would say overwhelm is probably the word I hear the most often in my work. Stressed, overwhelmed, oversaturated, all of the things, just hitting a brick wall.
And do you think that they feel overwhelmed because they just are looking at their kitchen, or looking at their room, they're looking at their basement, like I have so much stuff here? Or do you think that overwhelm in other areas of their life and clutter like in their home go hand in hand?
Yeah, I would say, it's both. I think clutter has a massive cost, not just in terms of like productivity and efficiency and just, I need to find my keys, but I think it also is this kind of lurking background feeling of constantly feeling like there's unfinished business. There's things I haven't taken care of. There's problems to be solved. And so the mental toll that I see is massive in terms of stress, anxiety, fatigue, exhaustion, distraction. I mean, I could go on and on. And the people I work with are really normal people like me and you that, have jobs, or highly functional. And then they come home and they feel like so exhausted and overloaded, and like they just can't get on top of the piles. And I have found it usually has less to do with the physical stuff and more to do with the mental obstacles or the real root cause of the clutter.
And what do you think is at the root cause of clutter for most people?
So I think there's a number of factors at play. I think, we all know the pressure to consume, I think right now is probably at an all-time high in history because consumption has never been easier, right? Like I have a client who has a button in their kitchen and they can literally push it and it orders all of their household supplies. So they don't even have to think anymore. Do I need more paper towels? Do I need more dish soap? It's like their toddler can push this button and all of a sudden there's 9 million Amazon boxes. And I think that feeling is kind of universal for people of like, it's gotten so easy to shop and consume and buy things with the click of a button and with auto pay and all of the things that we don't have that friction and those obstacles that we used to have of having to get in the car and go drive to a store and get out our wallet and even pay with cash. And so I found even as kind of a card carrying minimalist, I sometimes find myself consuming things just mindlessly that I don't need. So there's that. There's like the lack of friction. There's also, I think, what I see most commonly in my work is people are trying to fill some sort of hole or ache in their lives. And that can be anything from loneliness, anxiety, feeling lost in your life or career, feeling like you've lost an identity after kids or a big life transition or a loss. And I find that often, some people overeat, some people overdrink, many people overshop. And that's probably the biggest theme that I've seen is just people feeling like it got out of control. Like I wanted a quick fix or a distraction or that dopamine hit. And now here I am drowning in piles and I don't know how to get on top of it.
I think when people become too restrictive, it creates problems because then it almost drives that dopamine to make you want more of that thing, right? So how can people determine like what's essential, what they actually need when they want to buy something, so that they're not just buying things just to buy it and then only to have, stock it away in the corner after a week or two of using it? Like how can somebody determine if they're shopping for something that they're actually going to use long term?
Yeah. So I would answer this in two parts. So part one would just be how I define minimalism, because minimalism really freaks people out. So I define minimalism as being radically intentional, not just with the things you own, but with how you spend your time, resources, and energy. So I think before you buy anything, you've got to take that beat to clarify what's important to you and what you want to build and create more of in your life. And then I think as you go out to consume something, you can simply ask yourself, is this getting me closer to the life that I want or further away from it? And it can be that simple. Like for me, I determined years ago, I wanted to be a person who traveled the globe. And I'm super curious. I love adventure. I want to be able to go out and about as much as possible. That feels like freedom to me. And so when I have that urge to buy a new electronic or a handbag or whatever the thing is, if I check myself and say, is this going to get myself closer to being a person who can easily travel the world? Or is it going to just lead to more time suck, energy distraction? It can become really simple. The other, of course, just really like basic practical answer is shop your home first before you buy anything. Check. And this is such a common thing that people say. I mean, I remember at one point, I think we had 11 boxes of lasagna noodles and we don't even make lasagna, but we just kept thinking like, well, what if I need lasagna noodles and buying them? So I think it's like, take that quick peek in your closet, in your pantry, in your office. Do I have this thing that I'm about to buy? That's a quick, easy, practical check.
And there's novelty in like newness, right? In like getting the new thing. And even like, if you look at like phones, in many ways, they're designed to require you to upgrade your phone in order to use like the same operating system, right? And so how can somebody like determine as they're going through their home before they're buying something, if that thing needs to be replaced? Like saying, like, for instance, if they're shopping for like a couch and they're like, oh, like I've had this couch for like, 4 or 5 years, maybe it's time for a new couch. Or, I've had this oven for the last 9 years. It looks a little rusty. Do I need one? Do I not need one? So how can somebody like bridge that gap so that they can properly understand whether or not they need to replace something that they already have?
Yeah. So we're in such a automatic culture of always replacing, always elevating without that stop. So it really is just the pause to say, do I actually need this new thing? Will it add value to my life? Is it something that can be fixed or upgraded or repaired for much less money? And do I like my reasons for buying it? I mean, my husband loves to cook. And so we didn't need a new oven, but we decided we wanted to upgrade, right? So that was a very intentional choice. I think it's unrealistic to say to people like, unless something is on its last leg and it's rusty and falling apart, you may not replace or elevate. I think the key is being very mindful and intentional about why you are doing it. And if it is in fact a good use of your money and your resources for this season in your life, right? Like if you're in a college dorm and barely cooking, it doesn't make any sense to upgrade your stove. But if you're like a family guy and you're cooking all the time and you hate your stove, that's a great investment. So it's always taking that beat and deciding, does this add value for my life now? Yes or no?
And then the thought of like declutter and minimalism, like you mentioned, can become very like daunting and overwhelming. And it's like, I think there's a few thoughts, right? The first thought is like, it's going to take so long to go through everything. The second thought is, am I going to be depriving myself? Am I going to like not have as much fun? Am I going to end up missing the thing that I'm throwing away? Or I've had this thing for X amount of years. My great grandmother gave it to me, or whatever the example is. They don't know where to start. So they're like, you know what? Just screw it. I'm not even going to give this any sort of thought. If somebody's listening to this or watching this and they're in their home right now and they know they need to declutter, but they don't know where to start, what's the first step they can take?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is you want to define why you want to declutter, and you want to get a really compelling motivation for yourself, because most people do not love slogging through the piles. I'm probably a rare exception where it's invigorating for me, but you've got to have a reason. So some of the reasons clients of mine have given are, I'm embarrassed to have people over. I feel like my house isn't host ready and I want to be able to entertain. I've had people who are single after divorce and they're like, I want a date, but I would be embarrassed to bring a date to my house. So that's a really compelling reason. Or maybe it's a career transition. Like I want to become an executive coach and have a home office, but my office feels like a dumping ground. It's not professional. I wouldn't feel good with clients seeing this Zoom background, right? So it's got to be something that's anchored to a value or a goal or a priority in your life. So that's number one, is just finding that clarity. Number two is you've got to reduce the friction and the overwhelm. Most people make the mistake of trying to organize everything all at once, getting totally overwhelmed and then giving up. So I always tell people, pick one room or zone. Within that, pick a drawer or a single surface or single shelf, set a timer for 15 minutes, see what you can do. Like, it's shocking how quickly you can actually transform your space when you don't have all of the mental drama about how much it is and how it's never going to happen. And so I've dubbed this a 15-minute win. When somebody's really overwhelmed, I literally will just say, pick a single drawer, set a timer for 15 minutes, roll up your sleeves and see what you can do.
And then where does somebody go from there?
Yeah. So I think one of the other big obstacles I see is people who have decluttered then don't know what to do with the stuff. And then if it sits by the door for too long, you start thinking, do I need this? Was this a mistake? What if I might need this in 5 years? So I think identifying places in your local community that feel really good to give to is a crucial step in this process. I like to say to people, have your short list that includes where can you donate things like clothing, household goods and essentials? Where can you drop off things that are a little bit harder, like textile recycling or e-waste? If you have that short list and you know it's like within 15 minutes, then again, that's another 15-minute win. You've decluttered, you've gotten things out the door, and now it's a quick, easy drop off instead of sitting there with more decision fatigue. Now, what do I do with this? How do I donate responsibly? That research can be as simple as like a Google search, donation resources near me, 2 seconds.
I like the 15-minute rule because I think that can obviously create some momentum, and it gives people like a short focused, time window to work within. I also think that people, when they're in certain areas of their home, can be more overwhelmed. Like, for instance, if they have so much stuff in the kitchen, it can lead to feeling overwhelmed and wanting to declutter if they're in their office or in their room. What do you think is the most common place that people keep clutter, that after, doing this 15-minute thing to get yourself some momentum, like what's the room that causes the most amount of problems with clutter in people's homes?
I would say home office and paperwork are just an absolute nightmare for people. In addition to the deeper storage areas like the basement, garage, attic, which I think just tend to be like a graveyard for stuff, often neglected for a whole lifetime. And it just becomes so intimidating to even like go into that space because it's not a living space you have to kind of keep up with. It's like a shove and pile zone is what I call it. So I think for those kind of like deep, dark storage areas, often what really helps people is moving it into a fresh location. So like if you're used to seeing a big pile of paperwork on your desk in your home office, take it and move it outdoors onto your patio and sort it there. Take it in your living room. Likewise, for a garage, I'm always having people move it outside when weather permits. Let's go through this in the fresh air instead of where you always see it. And that has the added benefit of when people are visually accustomed to seeing the same thing, they kind of assume it's fine and they'll gloss over it. Whereas if you take everything out, even if something like a junk drawer, people see it with fresh eyes and it's like, what is all of this? Why do I even have this? And then you can really be strategic about only returning the things that you want to keep. Right.
And then as far as like systems people can put into place for certain rooms in their home, like, take the home office and paperwork, for instance, which is one that I think, even like looking at my own office, I'm like, oh, I got paperwork here, I got a plaque here, I got books here, I got this bike that I just got delivered sitting next to me that I'm trying to hide out of the frame. Like, there's all these things that are like around me that I'm like, how can I do a better job at organizing? Like, what are some of your like top hacks for, getting people set up with systems to keep things like this organized?
Yeah. So here's, to me, the coolest thing about organization is its simplicity. So organization is as simple as grouping similar things together and giving each category a designated home. So that's something that like your 5-year-old can do, right? It's like with like, all the balls are together. And now where do we want to put the balls? We're going to put them in a ball bin. Now we always know where to find the balls. So same thing with a grocery store. I always love to use that as an analogy because if you walk into a grocery store, it's so broadly zoned that you know all the dairy's here, all the meat's here, right? You want to do the same thing in your home or your workspace, right? So even if you don't have time to do a super diligent declutter, just by centralizing all of your loose paper into one vessel for future review will make you feel better. Get all of your electronics together, centralize them into one drawer. Likewise with like books. You just want to feel like your brain can walk into a room and easily process the physical items as information. And if they're all jumbled, your brain has to work overtime and feels overstimulated. So I would say top tip is just group and centralize as a starting point. And then within that, you can say like, oh, wow, I have 200 books in my home office. That seems like a lot. Let me get rid of the low-hanging fruit, like the duplicates, the things I haven't read in 5 years, right? But I think just thinking about organization differently can really start to help people. It's as simple as grouping like with like.
Right. And as far as paperwork, like the old thing was to keep things in a filing cabinet or to have like a drawer that has like folders in it that you could put the papers in. And obviously, it's 2024, I mean, maybe 2025 by the time this episode comes out. And I mean, I think it's probably pretty rare that people are going out and buying filing cabinets for their homes these days, unless they have like they have a business and they have a bunch of like documents and stuff they're storing. And obviously with the rise of technology and things like Google Drive and Dropbox, people are able to store files like online in a way that you weren't able to years ago. What's the hack for that? Like for people to keep something, like you said, paperwork, which is the thing that overwhelms people the most that you've seen. Do you do it digitally? Do you recommend people get a filing cabinet?
No, I would never recommend that people get a filing cabinet at this point in time. Yeah. I would say get rid of your filing cabinet ASAP.
Get rid of the filing.
Yeah. Number one advice. Yeah, I would say, I always like to ask like a financial advisor or a CPA, like, hey, what do I have to keep? What is non-negotiable in terms of paper? Everything else I would have digital, I would shred, I would get rid of. So I can say like at this point in my life, I'm a busy working mom. I've got a husband. I've got kids. I've got a business. I write books. I probably have the equivalent of like one file folder of paper left in my life. So there's really nothing left to organize. So I would say as much as you can, unsubscribe from all the paperwork, the junk, get on the auto bill pay online, reduce the paper clutter as much as you can. It can feel impossible. DMA Choice is a great organization where you can, with a click of a button, unsubscribe from most junk mail.
Wait, DMA Choice, you said?
Yeah. So that's super helpful. And then just kind of auditing what are all the bills I pay. And you can sit down, another 15-minute win, go to each website and just click the, paperless button. So you can limit that paperwork that's coming through. And in terms of digital organization, the same rules apply, right? So your computer desktop doesn't have to be another source of clutter. You can just drag and drop everything into big, broad files, right? It could be as simple as work, personal, finance, dog, like make those categories as big and as easy for your brain as possible.
And it's interesting you bring up the digital part too of like clutter, because, I had like, up until maybe like, I don't know, a few weeks ago, I had like 25,000 photos on my phone. And like, for me, I've never like gone back. Like once I take a photo or if I'm like screenshotting something from the podcast, it's just there. Like I don't go back and be like, oh, like what do I need to delete? There are people that are like, oh, I don't want to, like, what if I never see this person again? Or what if this memory from like 7 years ago was an important moment in my life. I need to keep this photo. Or you could say the same thing with like files on the computer where I have, I think in my like Dropbox or something, I have like all these audio files from different phases of the podcast and documents and stuff. So for that, like when you can just buy more space, like on your phone, you can upgrade your phone and buy more space. On your computer, you can buy more space, and it kind of eliminates the need to like clear things up. But with that said, it can be annoying if you have like, again, like 40,000 photos on your phone and you're trying to like go through and find stuff. How can somebody, I guess, digitally Detox?
Well, first of all, full disclosure, I am the person with 40,000 photos on my phone.
Okay.
And I just wrote a book about decluttering your life. So there are certain places.
Next question.
Yeah, no. No, but there are certain places where I say, like, don't sweat the small stuff. Like, if it's going to take you, as I calculated, days, weeks, or months of your life to thoughtfully edit all of the photos on your phone, or you can pay $2 and move on with your life. It's kind of a cost benefit analysis, right? For me, I was like, this doesn't bother me very much. And I just simply don't have the time. But with emails, like, I'm an inbox zero person. So I'm super hardcore with that part of my digital life. The advice I give to people there is, if you have more than 500 emails in your inbox, archive all but the most recent 500 so that it feels more manageable, and know that you're always a quick search away from finding anything you need. The other thing I want to speak to, though, quickly is like this scarcity mentality that you kind of briefly touched on. The what if, what if this happens? What if I need it? What if I regret it? That comes up a lot in the work that I do. And I think one of the things that's been really helpful for me and my clients is going through the line of thinking, what if that happens? Like, then what would I do? Right? And often it's like, oh, I would drive 3 minutes and pick up the thing, or I'd borrow it from a neighbor, or it actually wouldn't be that big of a deal. I would say that's the answer like 99% of the time. And the other 1%, like, no problem, keep the thing. But I think if you can follow that train of thought instead of just indulging in the fear and then keeping just in case, you can spare yourself from keeping a lot of unnecessary clutter.
And that gets me into my next, I guess, thought around this, in that, there's people that hold on to things because it was like sentimental value. Like somebody gave that to them like 20 years ago, or it's something that they used to use and it was meaningful for them at that time in their life, but now they don't. So how can somebody like properly determine whether or not something actually has sentimental value, or they're just using it as an excuse to keep something that they don't need?
Well, I like to set up a physical boundary because it's such an arbitrary thing and it's so hard for our brains to make decisions like that. But if we have a physical boundary to measure against, like, a quick example is, I lost my dad 10 years ago and inherited an entire house full of stuff that I didn't need or have the capacity to store. So I had to put a physical limit on how many boxes can we fit in our basement in our small 100-year-old craftsman home in the Bay Area, right? And the answer was like maybe 6 banker boxes. So then as I'm going through my dad's house, where anything and everything could be perceived as deeply sentimental. It was my dad's. He touched it. I love him. But instead, I had this kind of filter, which was, is it one of the top things that's going to fit in one of these few boxes that I have space for? So physical boundaries can really help people with decision making. So can setting a number. Like, sometimes, I had a client who was an only child who inherited all of the family china. And like, in this day and age, most people are not eating off of fine china. So she was faced with this kind of grueling feeling of like, I'm the keeper and the inheritor of all of this stuff, but I don't want it. I don't use it. And so we decided to keep 1 teacup from each collection. So she ended up with 12 teacups, but then donated 12 full sets of china to people who could need it and use it. So sometimes it's making that choice of like, I'm going to keep 1 from a collection, or I'm going to keep my favorites that fit in this box. Or it's just deciding that whatever decision you make, you've got your own back and you're not going to indulge in regret for the rest of your life because there's just no upside to it.
And I think people like associate free with like keeping something, right? And when I say that, it's like you said, you inherited all this stuff, and there's people like when they move, they're like, oh, let me see if so-and-so wants my couch. Let me see if so-and-so wants my TV. And then a lot of people are like, oh, it's free. I'll just like, doesn't cost me anything. I might as well take it. And then it just things just pile up and collect dust. How can people get better at that? Because I think that people, in a sense, they're like, oh, this is free. I'm not paying for it. So what's the point? And they're also like, oh, like my mom or my dad is offering me this stuff. I would feel weird if I said no. How can people improve their decision making around that?
So boundaries are so hard for people to set. And I think it often feels easier to just say, sure, I'll take it than to figure out a gracious way of saying no, thank you. I think what helps me is thinking about the cost of bringing that thing through the front doors of my home. So every single thing we allow through, like I think of us as like the gatekeepers or the bouncers at the front door of our home. Every single thing we allow into our home is now our responsibility. We've got to find a place for it. We've got to keep it clean. We've got to organize it, care for it, clean it, eventually dispose of it, hopefully responsibly, right? That's a long life of one thing. And so for me now, when somebody offers me almost anything, it's an instant, easy no, because I don't want any more responsibility in my life. I've got enough. And so it's doing that work ahead of time to kind of determine what are the things that are worth the time and energy and effort to keep and maintain in my home. And if these things that are being offered to me are not on that short list, I have an easy script for saying no. I mean, I just say to people like, so generous of you. We're totally at capacity right now. I'm sure someone else could use it more than we could. Or even recommending a person or an organization or a charity that could, be served by that object. I think so many people make the mistake of saying yes because it feels easy, but it's actually that yes turns into a whole lot of responsibility and headache for them later.
That's obviously one problem when it comes to clutter is that. Like, I think that's probably, if I had to guess, that's one of the biggest causes of clutter is taking on other people's stuff. Another one you mentioned was when people start to clean things out, they don't know where to put things. Like if they start to clean out that drawer, like you mentioned, they're like, all right, I have all this stuff I don't need. What do I do with it? Do I throw it away? Do I take it to the dump? Do I give it away? Etc. What are some of the other big problems that people tend to face as they're starting to, minimize the stuff in their homes and declutter?
Yeah. So you identified two of the big ones, like gifts and guilt and inherited things. And then also just the paralysis if I don't know what to do with this. I would say the biggest one I see is just overwhelm. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it, which is why I'm always saying make it micro. If you feel overwhelmed doing one room, do one drawer. If you feel overwhelmed by your whole garage, say, I'm going to just take out one bin and sort through it. And that's my victory for the day. Tomorrow I'll do another bin. So that's a big one. I would say other people tends to be a big problem. Like most people in a household, I work with a lot of busy, couples, families. They're not all on the same page, right? So somebody might be really pumped to edit and become more minimal. And someone else might be constantly saying, well, no, what if we need that? Or I bought that for you. Or wait, that could be really useful. So I think that's a thing. If I had a solution for this, I'd be a billionaire, like solving the problem of other people. But I think trying to figure out how to create some common ground with the people that you live with, right? So I have a husband who has ADHD. He's not neat and tidy the way I am. And his clutter threshold is totally different from mine. So one of the things that has helped us in our marriage tremendously is we built him a shed in our backyard. And he now has the space that he can dump and pile and have piles that don't bother him but would make me crazy. So he feels like he has this autonomous zone. But he also has agreed to maintain our shared living spaces. So our kitchen and living room and dining room stay super neat and tidy. My teenagers get to do whatever they want in their respective rooms. So that's been really successful. Instead of trying to change all of them to be like me, I've accepted they're never going to be anything like me. But as long as we each have a zone we feel good in our house, we can all kind of peacefully coexist.
And along those same lines, like you mentioned, like you got your husband a shed to help him like throw his stuff in there. Do you recommend like scheduling time like every month, every quarter, every year, even to go through like certain areas of the home, certain files on the computer or something to declutter so that way it becomes like almost, like a routine you get into?
Absolutely. Yeah. I talk a lot about systems in this new book because I think it's crucial. Habits and systems, like even once you've decluttered and organized your whole house, it's not going to stay that way, right? Life isn't static. So I would say at a bare minimum, a seasonal edit, even if you can just do your paperwork and your clothes, just those two things. I have a ritual every year on New Year's because I'm such a nerd about this stuff. Me and my whole family do a kind of family closet edit. And then we go through any remaining papers or tax stuff. And it's a way of like starting the new year fresh and saying, I'm only bringing this stuff into this new year that I love and use and adds value to my life. So I would say to people that even feel like they're so busy that a seasonal sweep seems unrealistic, start the new year fresh by just attacking your paper and your clothes. Those are like the two things that I tend to see a lot of pile up.
This episode is brought to you by Element. Whether or not you're working out, hydration is so important. Water alone is key, but drinking water on its own sometimes just doesn't cut it. That's where Element electrolytes come in. They have formulated a science-backed electrolyte ratio that tastes absolutely amazing. Plus, it doesn't have any sugar, artificial colors, or other sketchy ingredients to hold you back. I've been using Element for years, and my favorite flavor is definitely the citrus salt. I take it either first thing in the morning when I wake up or after a workout or a run. After taking it, I always feel replenished and ready to move on to the next thing I am doing. I know when I am properly hydrated, I perform and feel my best. So if you're looking to optimize your hydration, go to drinkelementT.com/DougBopst to get a free sample pack with any purchase. Again, go to drinkelementT.com/DougBopst or click the link below for a free sample pack with any purchase. Now back to the show. Diving more into clothes, right? I feel like people have a hard time with that because, again, there's some sentimental value sometimes with clothes. Sometimes, people are, transitioning as far as like their health and fitness goals. Maybe they have a few pounds they want to lose or a few pounds they want to gain. And they're like, you know what? I'll hold on to this stuff because I'm going to, lose some weight. I'm going to gain some weight. And then also, people are like, oh, I still kind of wear this, maybe not as often as they think, but they still wear it. What is like the protocol for like decluttering clothing? I feel like that's a big problem for people.
It's a huge problem. And I think like the transitional body that most of us have makes it a lot harder. As a general rule, I am anti maybes. I'm anti what ifs and transitional because I think it's just taxing for your brain, whereas a clear yes or no feels like relief and freedom. So typically I say to people around like the aspirational clothes, that's fine if you want to keep them, but get them out of your closet, right? So if you have clothes that don't fit you now, but you would love to wear one day, box them up, put them in a one day maybe pile in your deep storage, but make sure that the closet that you open every single day when you go to get dressed is only filled with things that fit and flatter your current body. There's so many reasons for this, but it helps boost your self-esteem. It makes you feel like you don't have all of these provisional things. It's not a constant reminder that you should be different, right? It's like, to me, clothes are so wrapped up in identity. And if you can open your closet and know that everything in there fits you and flatters your current body, and you don't have to slog through a pile to find a t-shirt or a pair of pants that button, you're just going to feel better. And so I would say to people, like, think about what you need for the current season in your life. You can just think about it as a 3-month block. What am I wearing now for my career, for my life, travel, events, workout? What do I reach for? Anything that you're not reaching for, either let it go or put it out of your space.
How can somebody better organize things like clothes, shoes? Like I look at my closet and I have like shoes everywhere. And I'm looking at it like, oh, I still wear these like twice a year and they were like X amount of money. They cost me X amount of money. And I think that's the problem too, is like people are like, I spent, $500 in this pair of shoes, or I spent like $1,000 on this dress or whatever the example is. They're like, if I throw this away, like that means that in some way I'm wasting or I'm ungrateful for the purchase that I made or somebody bought it for me or whatever. With that said, how can somebody effectively like organize things like clothing and shoes?
Yeah. So, and the sunken cost fallacy is real. I mean, that's so typical for our brain to be like, I spent $1,000 on this. If I get rid of it, what a waste. Well, the money's already gone. So now you're just wasting space in your closet. That's my answer for that. In terms of your question on organization, for a closet, I like to organize by part of your life, right? So I have clients who are doctors. So that means they are in scrubs 5 days a week. Their closet needs to make sense for their life. So I would say front and center in your prime real estate area should be what you put on almost every day, like your uniform, as it were. So, you're a podcaster, you're probably not going to be in suits and ties on a given Monday, right? So you should have the clothes that you want to put on at front and center, at arm's reach. Then in the further recesses of your closet, like the back or the hard to reach areas, that's where you put things like those shoes you mentioned that you wear once or twice a year for a wedding. Whereas the shoes you wear every single day should be right in front of you at arm's reach. So it's all about kind of zoning your closet by type and usage. I personally like to organize my closet by color. I think aesthetically it's really nice. And then if you're looking for a white t-shirt, you find it in 2 seconds. But for people that really have separate identities, like in their career, like the doctor in scrubs or the professional that's in a suit all week, but then, yoga stuff on the weekends, you can zone your closet by type so that the key is making your life easier, right? So it's whatever is going to make it easy to get dressed in 2 seconds and simplify decision making. I have opted for a daily uniform, so I wear almost the same thing every day with minor variations. So my whole closet is basically blouses and jeans. And then, I have sneakers and I have elevated shoes, and that's it. So I can get dressed in 3 seconds. My brother's the same way. He wears a black t-shirt and black jeans every single day of his life. He can go to like a Michelin star restaurant, or he can go to the beach and roll up his black jeans, but he never has to think. And it just gives you so much more time and energy and freedom when you're not spending 45 minutes tearing up your closet every morning.
I think was it like Marie Kondo was like somebody who really was big in decluttering, organization, and how to like fold things a certain way to save space. What is your take on like her book, her work, and then like what would you do differently?
Yeah, so Marie Kondo has done so much for my industry, so I'm super grateful to her. And there's a lot of places where our work does not overlap. So I think her prime directive for people, which was really liberating for people, was you keep something based on if it sparks joy, right? So that was the prime directive. I have clients who say to me, everything sparks joy. I love everything. I can find a reason to keep anything. So then they're in the same position that they started, right? So I have a really values-based process and toolkit around organization where I say you only keep something if it is necessary and enhancing your life right now. If not, it's like anything could be helpful. It could be useful, but is it useful to you right now in this moment? The other big thing is, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I care deeply about the environment and sustainability. And so there's kind of a culture of like, if you don't want it, just toss it, just throw it out. And I think potentially, not intentionally, Marie Kondo sparked this movement of people just throwing things in the dumpster. I tend to really focus on sustainability when it comes to decluttering and figuring out where can you rehome these items that you don't want so they're not going into the landfill. And so they might actually help somebody. And that's very important to my work. And I think the third distinction would just be style and design. I have a very clear aesthetic. I help my clients kind of identify their own aesthetic. And I think aesthetic organizing helps people want to maintain their spaces. When you feel proud of your space, when you feel like your space reflects your unique style and personality and identity, it makes it more fun to maintain it and put things away. So I think elevating your space in addition to just organizing it can be a real catalyst for change for people.
What types of things do you recommend people have as staples that will enhance the organization of their home?
A donation bag. No, I would say, so it's funny because whenever people want to work with me or they buy my books and they say like, I'm going to get organized, the first thing they tell me is, I'm going to go to the Container Store and buy all the bins and baskets. And I say, please don't do that. So we talked about some of the big organizing mistakes and pitfalls. I would say one of the number one mistakes people make is thinking that organizing products are going to get them organized. So for me, my process is first you clarify why you're organizing. Then you cut the clutter and edit. Then you organize grouping things in broad categories. And then and only then do you look at your home and your surroundings and ask, do I need something to elevate this space? And if I don't already own it, then you can go buy it. So my favorite tools would be hooks. I think a hook can solve almost any organizing problem. I have them in every room of the house, in the entry for coats and bags and dog leashes, in the kitchen. I'm looking at my kitchen for things like scissors, aprons, utensils, like anything can be hung on a hook. I also love airtight glass jars for keeping pantry staples fresh. And I would say my third thing is just a big, pretty open basket. You can use open baskets as a vessel to contain your mail, your laundry, linens, throw pillows, but it just makes things feel tight and orderly and elevated.
We talk a lot about mental health on the podcast, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the relationship between clutter and mental health.
Yeah, I think, clutter has been researched to be linked with anxiety and depression and overwhelm. I think when people feel out of control in their lives, it has a ripple effect into their physical spaces where they stop putting things away or taking care of business or feeling intentional because everything feels so overwhelming. What I found in this work is that physical clutter has a huge cost, and it's not just the cost of things like, I can't find my keys or I feel overwhelmed in my home. It's the cost of relationships, fighting with your spouse, fighting with your kids, not inviting people over to your home or entertaining or hosting play dates because you feel embarrassed. Clutter is also associated with financial loss. So typically a cluttered home, people are behind on bills, they're losing bills, they're not keeping track of their finances in the same way. And actually clutter has been linked with weight gain. So I have found and been told time and time again, when people declutter their homes, not only do they feel better because they can now find their things, their house looks better, but people often get on top of their finances. They get on top of their health and wellness goals. They lose weight. It's really can spark all sorts of change in every area of your life, from relationships to finances to health, wellness, fitness. It's kind of incredible what it can do.
It all makes sense. Shira, this conversation has been so good. I think the audience is going to get a lot of value out of this. I definitely learned a bunch. Just somebody, I've never really had a conversation like this to go deep into decluttering. So thank you so much for coming on. If people want to check out the book, they want to follow you online, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, so I have 3 books, Minimalista, Organized Living, and Lifestyled. You can buy them anywhere books are sold. My website, shiragill.com, is a hub for all things simplifying and streamlining. You can head over there, get tons of free tips, join my newsletter, and be part of the community.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I really think you're going to like this video as well. I'll see you there.